Welcome back, everybody. It's Mike again, and this is one of the final videos that we're going to be putting together for the in-home water test video series. So let's get to it. In this segment, we're actually going to be talking about water hardness and testing for water hardness. And if you look at this picture that I have, you can see in a bathtub, you can see the nasty scale that gets left behind, and what it does to the grout in the tile, and it's just nasty stuff. So if you live with hard water, this is what we mean by aesthetics. It's not so much that it's a health hazard, more so, well, it's a health hazard to the fixtures in your home. Things like your pipes themselves can scale up over time and become, like I said, atherosclerosis, like hardening of the arteries and having the scale that builds up inside where water can barely get through it. And then you end up spending thousands and thousands of dollars repiping your house and ripping into walls and ceilings and flooring. It's just a mess. You know, people don't replace their veins. They replace hearts and things, and then they usually get some sort of stent, and that's the MacGyver way of fixing some of that stuff. But you can't just roto-rooter out your arteries, right? So same thing with this. So what I have for you today is the Hawk. It doesn't spell that way, but that's how it's pronounced. It's a Hawk 5B hardness test kit. And I actually went through, as I mentioned in a previous episode in this series, where we had the little test strips for water hardness, and it didn't even match any of the 5 or 6 colors on the legend on the side of the label. And it was a grayish brown, and everything else was either brown, tan brown, or orange to terracotta brown, kind of like, you know, potted plants brown. And it just didn't match up, and so don't even waste your money on that. This is a better method because it's using a titration method, which I'm going to show you how that actually works here. So it comes in a rather nondescript box in French and English, and on one side it actually shows the directions. So we're just going to do this in real time so I can show you how easy it is. First thing you got is a test tube, which looks like about a 5 milliliter vial. Then it has one of these interesting looking things that might have been at a party on Miami Vice back in the mid 80s. You also have your water hardness, I can say that. It's been a long day. Hardness reagent. And so it's just these little specks, right? And you can probably hear it that way. So you have that. And then you also have another mixing container that looks closer to the 10 or 20 milliliters. And then you have in a sealed Ziploc bag the hardness reagent, which is another reactive that's a liquid solution with a eyedropper blotter. Okay, and we're just going to follow exactly what it says. Now I do want to call out that there is a hazardous warning here about the ammonium chloride, the sodium carbonate, another sodium carbamate, and then sodium sulfite. Okay, what it's talking about with the warnings. And so you don't want to get it in your eyes, you don't want to breathe it, and try not to touch it with contact. Okay, I'm a professional, been doing this for a while. Now that I said that, I'm probably going to jinx it and screw up. But it does come with an instruction manual, and it's multilingual. So one of these is going to be just right. But I don't see any English on this. It's French, Spanish, and Portuguese. Okay. Your English directions is actually on the box, so you just have to rotate the box until you see it say directions. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do. You're not going to see it on camera as well as I'm seeing it in real life. So the first thing it says to do is to fill the test tube to the top with a sample. Okay, so this is our test tube, and we're going to fill that up. And since we're doing water hardness, I'm just going to use the tap. Okay, so this is basically a measuring cup of sorts, and that is all the way up. So there's a full sample. As you can see there, it almost looks empty because it's so all the way spot on. Okay. Then it says pour that sample into the mixing bottle, which is this little guy here. So let's get that in there. Okay. We got that set. So I'm going to set that off to the side. Okay, it says add 1 level spoonful of the Univer 3 hardness reagent, which is the crystal stuff here. So that makes that easy. So we're just going to take this bottle, open it up, flip the cap over. Then you're going to take your little spoon, party spoon here, and you're just going to shovel it in and then tap off any excess. But you want to get 1 level of that, and I believe I got it, so we're going to pour that in. Okay. And I'll set the spoon off to the side here. I'm going to put my used materials off to the side. Then the next thing we do is we add the hardness titrant. And it did say to swirl to mix, so I am going to go ahead and do that. So it's got this nice pink translucent color. Okay. Now that's important that you see it that color first, because we're going to perform magic. And that's going to tell us exactly by the number of drops of this solution how hard the water is or how soft the water is. Okay, so I will just read this before I start. And it says add this solution to the mixing bottle drop-wise while swirling and mixing the bottle. So this is going to be a two-handed affair. And when the sample color changes from pink to blue, record the number of drops added. So that's the key. So I'm going to just kind of shake that around a little bit just for good measure. And this is a press and hold to get it off. It's not easy. They really want to make sure kids don't get into this stuff, okay? So I am unscrewing the cap. Now it's loose. I'm going to squirt and then let it vacuum up into this dropper. And I'm going to do 1 drop. So you can see here. 1 drop. Swirl it around. Still looks pink to me. Now I'm going to do a 2nd drop. No longer pink. It's looking kind of on the purple side. What do you think, folks? Not pink, right? Not pink. We're going to do a 3rd drop. Swirl that around. And there's our blue. See that? Okay. Now I'm going to take the excess of the blotter and just squirt it back into the bottle and recap and tightly close that and put it back into the protective container, sealed baggie, using all kinds of name brand names, but Ziploc. So it's shut. This is tight. I'm going to rinse my sample with regular water first, just because that's a habit for me. 2 times, shake it out, followed by distilled water. And rinse that out twice. Then I follow it up with my RO water because it's better than distilled. Because there's no salts in this distilled finished water that would cause any effects. Okay, I'm going to set my samples off to the side. I'm going to take the party spoon, measuring spoon, and I'm going to rinse that out as well thoroughly. First with tap water, followed by dousing it a couple times with distilled water, followed by RO water. So get the excess moisture out of it, set it off to the side, and do the same thing for the measuring test tube. And just kind of blot it to dry it. Okay. Then I'm going to do the same thing for this blue sample after 3 drops. Pour it out in the sink. Rinse it out twice with tap water. Rinse it twice with distilled water. And then finally, my RO water twice to remove any trace of any salts. Okay, and I'm just going to blot the outside. I'm not going to do the inside because we know about low pH affecting the next test, so we don't want to do that. And just as a good best practice, you always want to do that similar cleaning on the front end. If you suspect anything, if you see any residue or something, go ahead and pre-wash so that you get an accurate reading. Okay? So what it says is number of drops equals the total sample of hardness in grains per gallon. Okay? So I am basically at 3 grains per gallon. Anything under that, well, I actually have a scale here, I believe, that I put. And in my book, I mentioned that water hardness is collected from each source water sample for utmost accuracy, except for residential property. So, they're probably talking about hospitals and clinics, things of that nature. And so that's where I was in the corporate world, making sure that hardness is not an issue before it even got to our medical grade water treatment systems that we supported. The water hardness is a common metric for measuring mineral content. Hard water commonly leaves mineral buildup on water lines and openings, such as lime scale. Water in the 8 to 9 grains per gallon or GPG range is considered hard water. So anything above 7 I can tell you with full confidence that I used to live 10 miles south of where I currently live. As you saw, it's at 3, so it's pretty soft water. And I already knew that, but you just got to see it in action, so how easy it is to test. And you don't have to sit through a 3 or 4 hour dog and pony demonstration from the water treatment expert, aka water treatment dealer, high commission salesperson, trying to sell you a $10,000 to $15,000 system. You just saw me do it in the span of this time of this recording. So it's that easy, doesn't cost a lot of money. I think I spent $25-$30 on this test because it's a kit, just like the other kits that I showed you. So it's a little more comprehensive, but it is way more predictable results than the cheap route of going with a test strip that doesn't even match up properly. Go figure. So there's a sidebar here that you should know. And remember, we talked about TDS, or total dissolved solids. And it says in this sidebar note, I just want to make sure that I put it in focus for you here. If TDS is missing from a lab report, you can multiply 17.5 by whatever the grain hardness is to calculate TDS. So basically what they're saying is I could take that calculation and multiply it times 3, and I would come up with the TDS that I already came up with earlier, which was approximately 60 parts per million. And that's the tap water that I tested. I'm not going to test for hardness in a reverse osmosis. That's just not something that I feel compelled to do because I already have soft water to begin with. But you may want to go ahead and do both of those tests. And you saw how we rinse everything out using a 3-step process twice. It's kind of like lather, rinse, repeat. So that's how we go about that. And so that's the point, the call out that I wanted to make, that some water treatment labs, you may want to ask them, how do you measure water hardness? Is it going to be in parts per million, or is it going to be grains per gallon? And then you can do the simple math formula to determine that and see that it coincides with what you already measured with your in-home TDS meter. If they're really skewed, like worlds apart numbers, make sure that you use that solution to calibrate using the 1,000 parts per million TDS calibration solution. I think it was like $10 or something. And it's totally worth it to make sure, especially if you haven't used the TDS meter in a long time. Hopefully that's not going to be the case for you now that I've shown you some value about TDS and how tricky it can be and why you want to kind of keep on top of it, be on the pulse, so to speak, of your water's health. Okay? All right. So that's basically everything. Oh, and here's some examples of hard water scaling. Yikes. Bad news bears right there. And then there's actually, in my book, I have some water resources, including where the hardness is throughout the United States. And these maps get updated all the time. Here's another level of it, and it shows you in smaller pockets, more defined geographical areas of the country. So when I look at my state of Colorado, it looks like everything is either north central or west by southwest. Okay, but when I look at this example, it shows Colorado being mostly 181 to 250. And I can tell you that, again, at the point of being redundant, 10 miles south, the parts per million for TDS is 220 plus, which is not terrible, but it's not great. But their water hardness is something like 20 grains per gallon. It's like liquid rock. And you really do need to I mean, builders were including water conditioning systems with the purchase of the homes because they already knew how bad it was and they wanted people to be happy with their home that they invested in. So this rounds out the water hardness. We only have one bonus test to go for, and that is to test for the microbiological that nobody is really testing, or I should say very, very few are testing on the residential side. And if you are, kudos to you. But if you aren't, I've just become your new best friend and trusted advisor, because that is what separates the health dynamic from the aesthetics dynamic of water flowing in your home or in your business's influent water supply. Again, this is Mike Rogers. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.